Now, the International Criminal Police Organization has issued red alerts for Atul and Rajesh Gupta as well as their wife. Now, this includes those of 4 others suspected outside the country involved in the feasibility study of the Vrede dairy farm in the Free State. Gupta associate Iqbal Sharma's Nolani Investments was irregularly awarded a 25 million rand contract to do the farm's feasibility study, which it never performed. The funds were instead diverted to a company that's owned by the Gupta family. They join more than 10 accused, including companies, in facing charges of fraud and money laundering. Meanwhile, the Bloemfontein Regional Court has postponed the criminal case and transferred it to the Bloemfontein High Court for trial on the 6th of September. Now, for more on the story, I'm joined by Investigative Directorate spokesperson Sindisiwe Seboka. So good to be talking to you once again, Sindisiwe. Perhaps let's get an understanding of what a red alert is that has been brought out, or rather instituted by Interpol. What does this mean?
So what the red notice essentially means is that Interpol is now going to be working with our particular application that we provided to them to assist us in finding the 2 Gupta brothers, their wives, and several other business associates. So what this means is that Interpol has police officials all over the world. Many states have formed part and parcel of Interpol, even South Africa. But there are other countries like the North Korea and so who do not form part of Interpol. So what this means is that when the Gupta brothers decide to leave the country that we are under the impression they're in and go to another country, they then will be held or arrested, kept there, and South Africa will be notified that they've since landed in that particular country. Then they will be given a couple of days to then furnish that country with an application for extradition. So what it will then mean is that they will not be allowed to leave until we've actually furnished this particular application. But various countries will then have various time frames of how long that could be. We know that it could be from about 10 days, 30 days to about 60 days for us to furnish the application as to why we need them to be extradited back into our country. Then in that particular country that they found, the extradition process will start. There'll be hearings in that regard. They'll make their representation. Then that particular court will adjudicate, and then they'll be brought back into South Africa if that court deems it fit. But I must also emphasize that additionally to this, each and every country, if, for example, they are found in a country which does not have a treaty with South Africa, then we'll have to use a multilateral agreement like we had used initially with the UAE before they signed or ratified the treaty.
So does this mean then that this is not an automatic international arrest warrant, but what it actually is putting the Gupta brothers on high alert, on the most wanted list, so to speak?
So yes and no. No to the fact that it puts them on a wanted list, yes. But what it also does is that it buys us time. If, for example, they land in a country and Interpol does in fact then arrest them because of the red notices or keep them there, it then gives us an opportunity to then send an application to that country for the extradition application to then in earnest begin. So what it does is it assists us. So it doesn't just it doesn't just let us believe that they're in the UAE or India. But if, in fact, they have left, because we know that people with means do have the capacity to leave countries without being detected, quote unquote. So it means that if they do land in those other countries, we have somewhat of a surety or an extra eye to hold them there, to buy us time to then bring an application to that country.
I guess my question more plainly is this equating to an international arrest warrant?
Yes and no. It's quite technical, somewhat.
All right. I guess we'll leave it at that for now. But I want to find out from you, there was an extradition treaty that was signed with the UAE in June. How has that moved the investigations into the Guptas forward for the NPA? Has that allowed you to gain access to the banking statements, for example, that you had been wanting to gain access to?
For starters, that particular treaty that was ratified last month only comes into effect on the 10th of July. So just a couple more days for it to effectively come into effect. And what that will also mean is that it will help us with the extradition application that we'd initially brought via the United Nations Convention on Corruption, which was a broader application, but now it's from South Africa to the United Arab Emirates, which is more direct. But coming to your second question about whether we've now since gotten bank statements or any form of cooperation from the UAE, currently not yet. But we are hopeful that once it effectively comes into effect on the 10th, that there'll be more movement. But with or without that particular channel, the Investigating Directorate is known for being agile. We're using each and every route reasonably possible. But for this particular case, we can also put it on the record that our investigations are done.
Mr. Sindisiwe Seboka, thank you so much for your time this afternoon and that update on the Guptas, and a red alert, a red notice has been issued for them.